So I just watched the first episode of Rick and Morty season 9, and I'm very impressed. Um, I hope the rest of it is better, but for now, at least from the start of it, it really feels like my prediction, which I didn't record online or anything, but no, I'm just very happy that because I predicted that the show would get better, and the reason I thought this, the reason I thought this is because Justin Roiland left. And then the next, I think, season or two came out much faster. What this tells me is that perhaps there's just a little more like intellectual friction or creative friction going on before he left that was making them take longer. Not necessarily, just I feel like the more creative people you have together talking about something, it's like too many cooks in the kitchen spoils the stew. And theoretically, if you have 4 or 5 creatives who are kind of on the same page enough, but like, yeah, it's a thing. It's like collaboration. But sometimes if you have a collaborator that's like, has some other kind of, ever since Roiland left, I feel like it's not as much. The improv comedy of it is almost completely gone. So the improv comedy sort of charm to the earlier seasons, yeah, I don't see it anymore. And I kind of like that. I think they did as much, to me, I feel like they did what they could with improv comedy in it to make that fun. I just felt like it was getting old. Um, in fact, in the beginning of this season, they called something one of those nonsense names that they used in the past, and they're like, "Oh, it's not really called that, is it?" And he said, "No, its name is actually this. I just say that to mess with it." Basically, making fun of the show's tendency before to say, "Oh, it's aliens. It's called some dumb shit alien thing." Camp Flabbanabba. All these insane names. One character was called Herbergerber or something. I loved the show, and I thought that that concept of improv nonsense made it better. But yeah, it just felt like they're to the point where, first of all, I think it kept it very simple, kept the show very simple. So you had these high sci-fi concepts. If I can speculate how they made them, I'm not sure. Maybe there's a documentary on this. But just the way it looks from watching it, it kind of seems like maybe they even did it with role playing, but they came up with a basic sci-fi concept that they wanted to explore, and then maybe just workshopped it around for some period of time, workshopping it with improv, something like that. But it just felt like, as far as the plots always were very bare bones almost, or they would have more twists and things. They'd have more intellectual detail, but of course it wasn't like. It's a simple show, but yeah, it was just quite bare bones. So I think right now they're not going. In the last 2 seasons, the plots aren't more complex, but there's more action, so that's fun. I think I do kind of get the sense that they're making action to be filler while they kind of find the identity of the show, but I think more action is gonna stay in the show compared to before. There's always plenty of action, but now the action is like the plot, which I would feel like that's a little bit empty, but they tell such a story with action, especially with this season 9 episode 1. But I also noticed that in the season 8, I think it was episode 2 or 3, the clone episode, where they go to the Citadel and it's all the clones have a civilization. That was very impressive, and yeah, the action was telling a story, was advancing the plot. It was interesting. It had like sort of a forget what this is called, but basically instead of it wasn't just fight choreography. It was it had tension and payoff, which that's fairly impressive. That being said, Rick and Morty's identity is about importing ideas in. So like think I noticed in the season 9 episode 1 some jokes were imported or something like that from something I remembered, or maybe I'm thinking of something else I watched recently. But you know, so perhaps the maybe the fights themselves were fights from movies I've just not seen, kind of repackaged a little bit, which is fine. Um, you know, that's the thing about creativity. When it comes to creative stuff, it's like you want to take someone else's concept and just sort of recode it and play with it in a way. It's like I feel like stories or anything. Yeah, especially when it comes to storytelling, it's almost like making a piece of junk art. You take a piece of a lamp and a piece of, I don't know, an old-timey refrigerator, just all kinds of bits of junk from different full products that used to be one thing that was fairly standard, and you can make something new and funky. I feel that way with, especially, I think we're in a time of making more complicated stories, because I think this is what I always found really interesting about Rick and Morty, is that it was sort of a commentary on the concept sci-fi sort of genre. So, what's the concept sci-fi formula? Okay, basically some kind of status quo, whether it be, regular people living a normal life, or eventually I think it became more in style to say, okay, it's an action movie, but what if the, disgraced soldier or whatever can inject dead people with a serum to make them undead soldiers, or I don't know, some insane concept, or what if these soldiers are trapped in a jungle but instead of the native jungle people hunting them, it's the predator, um, or of course, like high concept, or even talking about new wave of like what if what if there's a disease but it's nanobots, or time travel, or dream inception, or of course teleportation. I think that Rick and Morty as a show especially the first few seasons, was a wonderful kind of, what's the word, commentary on these concepts, because or yeah, it was a commentary on these concepts, like especially the Inception episode and comes to mind. And it's funny because Rick keeps saying how the movie's dumb, and I didn't like Inception, to be honest. I don't like Christopher Nolan. I think his work is insanely pretentious. I feel like the work, like when you watch the movie, the editing and the music and stuff, gives all these cues that this is heavy, this is meaningful, and like the end of Inception. Oh, is he out of the dream actually, or is he still stuck in? Which it seems heavily implied he's still stuck in. Which, yeah, okay, sure, is a bit of a mindfuck, but like, it's just a cheap, the end question mark. Ooh, they just play it off with a multi-million dollar budget, or I don't know if the budget was really that high, but a lot of cues of this is heavy, this is a heavy, the music trails off in a kind of a dramatic way. I think that gives the people the sense, it sort of cues to people to say this was grand, this was important, this is deep. Is he still in the dream? What do you think? The end? Question mark. Um, really not more clever than. I mean, what's the difference between that and at the end of Flash Gordon, you see, I think, Ming's zombie hand or something. No, it wasn't that. I'm thinking of a different movie with that one. I think it was like a belt or some artifact laughed like Ming did, and it says the end. I mean, of course, that's supposed to be sort of subversive of subversion, but still, it's not clever to leave a question at the end. Unless there's some real, big point behind it. Maybe it is a little bit clever in the sense of, like, life is kind of a dream, if you get into, like, the hermetics of it. But, and perhaps that was intended. But then that gets into some, like, criticisms of sort of the Freemasonic arrogance that is saturated in the media, that is just gross to me. I don't like it. So then, yeah. See, where was I? I was talking about how Rick and Morty is a commentary on these things. Yeah, but okay, on the Inception episode, they incept, and then they go down to Freddy Krueger's realm, or rather they go down to hell. But they go to hell within the person, the microcosm of hell within the person, which probably the microcosm is sort of a door, a portal within the person. That's an idea I'm toying with lately. But yeah, I've had that experience. When you go deep down into yourself, you go to hell. I've seen that. I've astral projected into myself, and I've seen it. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's like, yeah, that's kind of true. So that makes me say that Rick and Morty, just this, very flippant, very, very cheap looking cartoon, it's giving me more data than Inception is the film did. The film Inception just showed us as the viewers something we saw a million times with like a little bit of a conceptual, like, new wave type spin, and then it didn't give data. See, this is as a magician where, like, I don't like this Freemasonic think about the concept. I don't give a shit about that. I want data, and I don't know if Nolan's a Freemason. There's plenty of things he might be, but yeah, I like one person asked me, I think this person was telling me how he was friends with, like, the biggest Freemason in the country. It's a small country, but whatever. And and I think he was kind of implying that he's a Freemason, and I maybe felt like just a little bit like, there's some attempt to, hey, I don't know. Sometimes it's like you're having a conversation and then you meet someone somewhere and it's like, wonder if something's going on here. Okay, that's getting a little bit into conspiracy theories and, dealing with ops and whatnot, and, then it's like, oh, is this person having a schizophrenic delusion or whatever? Whatever. If you know type of thing. But, he texted me, and this was the second time where where someone has asked me about the film Inception, right as I started talking with them. And I think this is, so I've come under the impression that it's a little bit of a secret society grooming tactic, because one of the main things in secret societies is dream warfare. So I've had my dreams attacked, and I know people around me whose dreams have been attacked. I mean, imagine someone having a bad dream every single night for 6 months. I mean, even as a magician, I've seen some weird shit. Um, you know, but I think a lot of people, like, if you know, you know. If you know, this doesn't sound that strange. If this sounds strange to you, you probably just shouldn't be watching this. um, you know, so. And I replied to this person. I said, I didn't like Inception. I thought it was really pretentious. I'm pretty sure I said that. Maybe I'll check the thing and put it down in the description or something. Check. I still have the text. I might check the text. But um, then I said, you know what? I liked the Rick and Morty episode better because when he went all too many layers down, when he went too deep. And when you go too deep inside of yourself, you go to hell, and it showed that in the episode. It's exactly right. That's exactly what happens. Something to that effect. And then he never messaged me back. And I texted him like a year, 2 years later because I saw like his mother-in-law at the place. And then he was like, "Oh yeah," hey. And then he didn't text me back again. But I don't have any animosity or anything, but this is a bit of a pattern where I've seen this a few times where it's like someone says something weird to me, and then I reply knowing what they mean, and then it's just like, retreat, retreat, and it's like, do I know too much here? Is there like a happy medium someone's looking for, where like I kind of have a little bit of an intuition towards it, but I don't actually like know. Whereas I know, and I learned through following my intuition and spirits and my own experimentation. And I don't know. To me, I'm 27. I've been working on this for like 7 years. Like, I've been realizing lately how powerful astral projection. How learning astral projection first, it really armed me to have a solid foundation and be able to have some kind of sanity in judging my experiences. I think some people just jump into ceremonial magic and don't really have enough of an ability to take control because their energy body isn't there yet. To me, like, I did the LBRP the first time, and I saw a lot of visuals because I had done a lot of astral projection. So when people do the LBRP, they don't even see it because they haven't sensitized themselves to that. Oh, it's kind of unsettling, to be honest. But anyways, back to Rick and Morty. Yeah, that was the whole first few seasons, though, is like sci-fi concepts, and then I feel like they purified the up in the air. Oh, it's a concept. Oh, it's like a soft disclosure. So when you come into some thing, I don't know, when you get kidnapped for the secret space program, it's like you'll be a quicker study. I don't know if that actually happens. Maybe. Maybe rarely, or I don't know if the secret space program exists. I was making a little bit of a joke because that's like, once you're talking about the secret space program, it's like anything could be true. So anyways, yeah, so then even after this era of just commenting on the last, probably 50 years to a century of science fiction. I mean, the Pluto episode kind of reminds me of Trip to the Moon, I don't think that it's supposed to be like Trip to the Moon, but it felt like it a little bit. So that was fun, but the thing is, there's only so many sci-fi concepts because, like in a A-B plot episode, they'd play with two different concepts a lot of the time, and then weave it together. And And then maybe even a third concept in the end, like epilogue or tag, I guess. Once they had one where it was saying tag, so I suppose that's what they call it. I haven't heard that term myself elsewhere. And I think also there's a lot of meta commentary. Like, people talk about meta commentary in Rick and Morty, but to me, I felt like there's a lot of meta commentary going on in like a really subtle way, and I've not heard anyone else really talk about it. It took me a long time though for me to watch Rick and Morty and start to feel like the esoterics in it were intentional. Because I think sometimes people can do a creative thing and come up with like different power systems and things like that, or just do different fun things, and it's such a frivolous show that it took me a while to be sure that the esoteric knowledge being dropped was correct. And at some point it just felt like, oh yeah, definitely. Or not correct, but like I said, intentional. Yeah, so, but I think, yeah, it was always obvious that they're gonna run out of viable sci-fi concepts to put through. Of course, probably there's infinite, very very unknown sci-fi concepts from decades and decades of probably thousands or tens of thousands of science fiction novels and other media, comic books, whatever. But there's a reason why some concepts are more popular than others. Yeah, like in Stargate, when they shoot someone once to stun them and a second time kills them. I don't know. Doesn't feel super. It's like, so it's like a smart weapon that they can sort of regulate itself to know what it's shooting at, or it's almost like a calculated dose that's accurate for any life form, that the first one will stun and the second will kill it. You know what I mean? So there's plenty of concepts, but some of them are obviously cooler than others. Yeah. I think it's also funny how they begrudgingly, quote unquote, do a Star Wars. That's pretty amazing, because Star Wars is fantasy. It's not science fiction. Whereas Rick and Morty really still is science fiction. It's a speculation, and then it's the interrogation. It's a speculation. It's an interrogation of some concept or whatever. Like, okay, posing this new rule, how would this work in X, Y, and Z? And it's very rarely not that. Until more recently. Like the Clones episode, it was a very glib sort of investigation of a concept. It was really more of a narrative, which is the way it's going, which is the way it has to go, because it's burned through a lot of the good concepts that come from pop culture and whatnot. Because a lot of the identity of the show is to work with pop culture. To me, it maybe looks like they're just guessing right off the bat from the way season 9 episode 1 went. I'm guessing they're moving away from this sort of meta commentary on pop culture sort of formula. And I'm glad, because it was great fun for what, 8 seasons. Yeah, even season 8 was commentary on like Prometheus or different things, but already with season 8 it was like halfway a commentary and halfway it was halfway a commentary, and it was halfway already making its own narrative. Like even the episode with Prometheus and the Easter Bunny. It almost felt like it was a satire, almost in the vein of. It almost felt like an episode of Family Guy or The Simpsons, in a way, the way that it sort of lampooned any and all religion. And then, then it was also a bit of a spoof of Prometheus, but it wasn't, it wasn't it wasn't an interrogation of the film Prometheus. It wasn't taking it and putting a Rick and Morty spin on it and sort of making fun of it at the same time. It was kind of a glib painting over with Prometheus. Yeah. So, anyways, I felt like season 8 was a little bit trying to be like, I felt this when as we were watching season 8. I felt that it was a little bit of this bridge into the new type of show, because I think a lot of the DNA of the show was based on Justin Roiland's input, and I think now that he's gone, just from what came after he left, I got the sense that maybe Roiland okay, first of all, Solar Opposites, because it's more Roiland's thing, is a lot more improv, but the improv is more complex. And it has the big science fiction concepts, but I felt like once Roiland left Rick and Morty, it's almost felt like the shared DNA of Solar Opposites and Rick and Morty. It's almost like Solar Opposites carved out of Rick and Morty, and now that DNA is no longer in Rick and Morty whatsoever. And now it's this more complex narrative thing. That's what I think will happen to some extent, is that it'll be comedy sci-fi, but it'll still be intellectually stimulating. I feel it's going to become a little bit more like Community, where it's going to be plots that are ongoing, like Community. But Community, I think, because it's a sitcom that uses the same handful of actors, it kind of got stagnant very quickly. I even felt like it was stagnant in season 2. I didn't like Community after season 1. I actually didn't like Community. Yeah, after season 1, I thought it was shit. Actually, at the end of season 1, I was already getting a little bit bored, but still, I think Community I see, the same creator in Community. I mean, I see narratively and things like that, the ambitious, the ambitious attempts to create something really interesting and special, like Abed being Jesus the one time. That's so interesting, but it just wasn't like built up in any particular way, and like we knew Abed as someone different before, and of course that it's gonna pay off in one way or another at the end of the episode. So it was this really like glorious build up in a single episode, but at the back of your mind, knowing it's a sitcom, you don't really care about it, or at least I didn't. And I think I can see that in Rick and Morty, except Rick and Morty doesn't have this sitcom status quo problem where everything has to start at the status quo, build up, come back down to the status quo. Rick and Morty can do something different that's really special, where it can start at a status quo and end at a different status quo. To talk about the meta myth system, Joseph Campbell's whole circle bullshit, which I don't like personally. It's not my favorite system, but anyways, what I'm trying to say is I can see why Rick and Morty is a scenario where, as a cartoon, where Harmon's interests, as a storyteller, and of course, he has a whole, he has a team of writers and whatnot, but I can see why the animation is this this medium where his talents, his interest as a creator can bloom, and maybe Community was sort of keeping him, adding constraints that were difficult for his desires as a creator. That's some speculation, but yeah, I don't know. I think I'm on to something saying that Community wasn't all that maybe was in his head. That being said, I think something else interesting is he seems okay. He's an old guy, so I remember he said in an interview, "Bleed on my garden so my flowers can bloom," talking about the writers in the writing room doing all this complicated work to, sort of enrich the story with, just taking things out to their logical conclusion, filling it out, making it actually more intellectual, adding more intellectual detail. This was about the Clone Cascade episode. He said that in an interview about that episode. But I think it's an interesting picture that tells me it's an interesting snapshot of his approach. That it feels like my assumption based on it is that a lot of Rick and Morty now is carrying the DNA of many of the different writers. That a lot of their impulses and whatnot are very dominant in the different scripts, and from episode to episode it's very different. So I think I'm very confident making this assertion, and I think that's really good to have creatives kind of spread their wings on this sort of thing, but to have someone directing it and saying, okay, this is good, this is bad, and having some idea where the whole thing's going and what the possibilities are. A creative director type thing. So, I based on all of that, I predicted that after season 8, I figured season 9 would already be better, but by season 10 they would the creative voice of the show would reform itself and be, clear again, and then it would be like it could go another 5 seasons and be excellent, and maybe Rick and Morty has in store another sort of a second golden era. The thing is, maybe people will like it, maybe people won't, but I think that it will do neat things. It will be neat, enjoyable television. Sometimes people like stuff, sometimes people don't, but I think at least to me, when I'm watching, I'll probably enjoy it more going forward. Like I would say some of the latest seasons are better than some. I think season 5 I didn't like that much, just as a whole. But every season has some dumb episodes, and every season has great ones, I would say. And then some of the dumb episodes I've actually come to appreciate more in the future, like the one where Rick and Morty are fighting against the what is it, the sperm invasion, and he has a kid with the horse lady. It's just so insane, and it's unbelievable that such a thing was aired on network television. But of course it's Adult Swim, which has such a reputation. They can kind of do what they want, I suppose. But yeah. Anyways, that's the only reason I enjoy that episode at this point. It's just the pure shock value, and not just that it's a little bit like degenerate, but that it's like just so bizarre. It's just such an insane left-hand turn that's never paid off later in the series. The the Chud princess never comes back. Maybe she will later, but it's just the episode could be left out and you'd never know about it. It's like almost the Star Wars Christmas special, but for Rick and Morty or something. It's it goes on the wall of shame or whatever, and for that, I think it's kind of legendary. Yeah. So I have high hopes for upcoming episodes. The Borg Brahma collective thing in this latest in season 9 episode 1 I was very impressed by it. I thought that was really neat. Also the part where they're just Rick and Evil Morty are standing and there's nothing happening and Rick's just saying, my nanobots are killing his nanobots. Our nanobots are killing each other or something. And then Morty goes to touch the air in between because he kind of doesn't believe it. And then his finger starts to burn off and he's like, ah, That was really clever because, yeah, if nanobots were fighting each other, you wouldn't see it. I don't know if his finger actually would burn up. I guess nanobots, yeah, I suppose it would. But yeah, I don't think you would see it because they're just particles. Then there's particles in air all the time. You don't see dust and particles in the air. Most people wouldn't see dust particles in the air if the lighting wasn't right. I suppose there's always some dust in the air. Very very fun. That's very fun. And I think it was season 8. Yeah, the clone episode again. The part where the clone Colonel Sanders dude is like talking about how he's disgusted with physical copulation rather than being born in a test tube because he's a clone and yeah he hasn't experienced that but to say that such beings don't even have the desire or don't have no comprehension of that almost is like that was kind of profound. I hadn't I never thought of that myself, I've never seen that before. And for coming to Rick and Morty expecting it to be kind of like, of course the show is a contrivance. The show is all about contrivance and it's a commentary on the contrivances of other stories a lot of times too. Or that's an element of it, commenting on how do we tell the stories we do, so it's meta on storytelling itself, which is fun. I don't think it's as clever as people think in that way. I think people say that Rick and Morty's like really clever and really high IQ show, but they talk about like one thing. I'm not, apparently there's some advanced science stuff encoded in. I saw that on a meme, though, making fun of people that love Rick and Morty. So. I don't think that sort of thing is as impressive as some people seem to think. But I think that the sheer amount of information packed into one show or into one episode, the amount of social criticism, meta narrative commentary on the way we tell stories, commentary on science fiction as a genre, also using science fiction as a lens to comment on other genres, commenting on entire genres in certain episodes, commenting on the way that we think. And I think to me the fact that the show cycles through so many like big ticket philosophical ideas, philosophical questions, it does make an impressive array of pop culture references, and frankly a far more clever way than say Family Guy. you know, it is a clever show, but for me, it's just it's the amount of dimensions, and not every episode is every dimension, but I think every episode or most episodes are many dimensions. Like the one episode where they make a Brahma Beth. It's such the way that it comes about is so funny, and then but it's God, but it's Brahma, and yeah, it's but the way it's played off, it's not, whoa, this is Brahma. Like, I think that's the thing that makes me respect it personally the most, is that it's not pretentious about itself. And I just find that so refreshing. But, like, Rick and Morty is one of those shows, it can't teach you magic. Like, I was a little bit accelerated down the path of magic learning by watching JoJo's Bizarre Adventures because the first two seasons especially are just very okay. You can't use your life force, say chi, to launch launch like a yo-yo or whatever at an evil god and chop them in half. But you can do some cool things with chi. You can heal yourself. You can introduce that X factor into your health to make it better. If anything, maybe JoJo's Bizarre Adventures is a commentary on, okay, you think magic's like the first two seasons, I mean, or two arcs, two generations, whatever. You think you're going to learn magic and do all this crazy shit, but it's a lot more subtle and obtuse than that. I don't know. Maybe it's a fun show, and it taught me some cool things. Rick and Morty couldn't teach you magic in that way, but I think once going deeper into magic, into the hermetics of it, into the like the hermetics and the philosophy, the hermetic philosophy of it, the sort of more philosophical energetics of it. Yeah, it's it has something to say on those things. So my interest in it is actually, I would say it's 50% occult, maybe 30% occult, 70% the rest. In the latest seasons, maybe it's the occult. I haven't noticed as many occult, sweet bits, but I've noticed some, like the fear hole, for example. I feel like I've had some experiences with that, with something similar to that, and well, hell, that could be like Bardo or something. Didn't even think about it. Anyways.